Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
We got a wonderful guest today. We got the pitching coach from Old Dominion University, Mr. Mike Marron. Mike, how we doing, man?
What's up, boys? How's everybody doing?
We're doing all right. Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your busy day and chopping it up with us here for a little while.
I'm glad to be on here. I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. You're doing a ton of really good things right now and in the profession. And, happy to be on here and appreciate you guys asking me. Flattered that you asked and looking forward to talking a little bit.
Hell yeah, baby. We'll take a couple minutes here. You've done quite a lot in this game, and walk the listeners through kind of how you've gotten to where you are right now.
I don't think it'll be very long. It hasn't been too many stops, but it's been, I think we tallied up. It's 20 years in the business now. Played at Holy Cross, was a pitcher, converted to catcher, and enjoyed my experience there. Graduated in 2005 and then joined Ken Herring's staff at UMass Lowell in the fall of 2005. Was super fortunate to have the chance to work with him for 4 years. And also during that time, got a chance to coach, had a couple stops in the summer at Pittsfield, back in the old Pittsfield Dukes in the NECBL, and for 2 summers and 1 summer in Orleans with Coach Nicholson. And then from there, got a chance to, super fortunate to have the opportunity to coach on Matt Senk's staff at Stony Brook for 6 years, from 2000, fall of 9 to summer of 15, and had an incredible experience there. And then from there, had the opportunity to join Chris Finwood's staff at Old Dominion, and I've had another incredible experience down here in Virginia. I am starting year 10 of my time at ODU. So fortunately, I've been in such good spots with really good staffs and phenomenal bosses that, in a profession that can kind of be a little tricky to navigate, family wise and just trying to kind of hunker down and find a home. I've had to move twice in my life, in my adult life. So super, like I said, feel super fortunate that I've found some really good programs and been surrounded by really good people and been at schools that I've really been excited about the people that we've been able to recruit and coach and have as alum. So they've been really good stops, really good programs. And it's been I've really enjoyed my professional experience as a coach. It's been awesome.
Yeah, we crossed paths when I was at William and Mary. Unfortunately, I think we were on the bad side of a couple of those encounters. Specifically, Vinny Pasquantino still hurts a little bit. Haven't lost that big donkey to you guys, but no,
that was a tough one.
Oh God, he was good. You did leave something out, and I'm going to make you talk about it for at least a second. But you're on a short list of guys that have coached in Omaha. Am I correct?
I don't know how long or short the list is. I happened to ride to jump on board in a program that within a couple of years, was able to go to the College World Series. So yes, 2010, like I said, fall of 2009, got a chance to coach at Stony Brook. Joe Panucci, who's now the head coach at East Tennessee State, does a phenomenal job there. Between Coach Sank and Joe, they've really put the building blocks together of, one of the best, mid-major teams. It's hard for me to go full hyperbole, but it was an incredible team. And, the year I got there, my freshman year at Stony Brook was a lot of those really that was freshman and sophomore year for a lot of those guys that were juniors and seniors on that 2012 Omaha team. And, between, whether it's obviously Travis Jankowski was a National Player of the Year in 2012, and as in his 9th year in the big leagues right now with the Rangers. You had your Pat Cantwell, your Willie Carmona. You had your Tyler Johnson on the pitching side, Frankie Van Durka, Brandon McNitt. You had some of those guys that were really just kind of horses on the rotation side, and really fun group. I really haven't been around too many other teams that were as close knit as that group, that truly loved each other the way that they loved each other, and were as willing and vulnerable to throw that term around to each other like they did. Like I kind of was telling our current staff, like their little MO to each other when they were talking to each other. It was just like, hey, like go get me, can you go get me something, like lovies, like basically just like love you. It was an incredibly tough group, incredibly close group. And, that love that they felt for each other was super real and tangible. So lucky to be, like I said, that was when I got there year one, it was kind of the building blocks of that group, some really good teams and players before that. That 2011 team might've been just as good. Nick Tropiano, who was another big leaguer, he was the two-headed monster with Tyler Johnson on that staff. So that 2011 team might've been just as good. Lost the Merrick East tournament and, didn't get a bid, but that 12 team kind of had a chip on their shoulder the whole year. Ran through the league. Probably was like a 21, 22 game winning streak at one point during the regular season. Was a 4 seed in Miami regional, won that, played LSU at LSU, beat them there in 3. We were lucky enough to find a way through. I think they had Aaron Nola go game 1, Kevin Gosman go game 2, and then Ryan Eads, who was the Cape Pitcher of the Year the summer before, he went game 3, and our guys just did an incredible job. Like one of the best things that, like Coach Sank's an incredible coach and mentor. And one of the best things during that run that I always found that he did was he realized the value, the connectivity of the group, and basically like let them play. Like he never inserted himself in any situation that he felt like that you would think most of the guys, like in the pinnacle of their careers, as a coach, like, hey, I'm going to make sure everybody knows who's running the show. And I don't think he did a master class job of running that team and getting those guys to take full ownership of their day to day and their competitiveness, and really sell out to the brotherhood of what that team was all about. And so there's some really good, obviously some good memories. But you hear me talk about like the process or the journey, because Omaha was cool, but it was short as heck. We were there for like less than a week. You show up, you get a media day, you get a practice time for like an hour. You go play 2 games. And for us, we weren't, we lost to UCLA, we lost to Florida State. And we were back on a plane. And then a couple of days later, Coach Panucci and I are back at Diamond Nation trying to figure out a 16U schedule. So it gives you some incredible perspective in the sense of, I feel incredibly lucky. I got a ring in my office that we get to kind of show off, and it's cool. But that year was way more about the year than it was about the week. That was way more about the memories that were made there, and the lifelong connections are way more about everything that you went to up to that point. And that's been a really awesome. It's given me awesome perspective as a coach to recognize that if I'm going to make decisions as a coach, professionally, family wise, in this pursuit of, an end result of like what's put me in the best position. Like, I don't know, like I think that year gave me a ton of context into like my career. I want my career to be about like being around the right people, being able to recruit the right kids, the right families, and trying to do everything I can to keep getting better as a coach and keep trying to impact, the program that I'm in as best I can. And if my family's in a good spot and I feel like the program is surrounded with good people and we have a chance to win every year, I'm in a great spot. Like happy to be here and not necessarily, feeling any itch to go find something else. And that's, I think, been a big reason why, I've been fortunate to be in the positions I've been in the programs and been able to be there a while. It's because like I said, lucky to have great bosses and lucky to, be around really good people. And those people are good enough to, like the Pasquantinos of the world, like you mentioned, like they're also good enough to help us win games and go to regionals and have awesome years and things like that. So that was a fun year, great year. And it's still, that year still impacts me now, however many years later, 12 years later.
Yeah, that was an incredible run. And it's cool to just hear you, because the process, you talk about the process, you talk about the brotherhood, like that's the part of college baseball that gets missed in the recruiting process, that like the people that you spend time with on campus, the guys that you goof around with, the guys that you travel with, you practice hard, you're up early lifting weights, like that's the hard thing to put a finger on until you've been a part of it. And like you've been a part of it as a player and a coach. And that's kind of the gold. Like that's kind of the engine of college baseball, is the day-to-day. Like the games are great, and that's obviously why you do all that work. But me and Keith talk about it all the time. Like you remember all the non-baseball stuff. Like so much of it is non-game stuff. You remember the practices, you remember the travel, you remember the personalities, you remember the camaraderie. Like that's such a huge part of the college baseball experience.
Yeah. I think Ed's done a really good job at Holy Cross. He's put together some really good recruiting classes, done a really good job of making that an incredibly competitive program, in the league. But it was, it was a little bit different when I was there. And I always, I think my memories aren't of like, hey, winning championships and going to like, my memories are of, like you said, a lot of the other stuff, like the experience. And that's always been a big part for me, is like, I want to be in a place where I know that, part of that experience is a winning culture, right? Like what are the building blocks of a winning culture? And like, I think a bit like what we try and talk about every day with our guys when they get here, but also in the recruiting process, is this idea of like, when I talk to a kid and a family, we're trying to create an experience, a college experience for these guys. Within that concept of an experience, the byproduct, we think of creating a really healthy, challenging, fulfilling experience is going to be guys get better, guys win, like the program wins games. And like, there's like all the things that people kind of think they're chasing, right? I need to get better and I want to win. Yes. Nobody wants to win. Like, I shouldn't say that. Like, I want to win. Like, I think I've only been lucky to be, I think, part of, in 20 years, 18 winning seasons, something like that. So like winning is incredibly important to me. Like that's a huge part of my decision-making process as a coach, but like how you get to that. Right. Or I feel like I've been lucky. I've been around a lot of good players that have gone on and not only had incredible college careers, which gets overlooked, like the credit that a lot of guys should get for having an incredible college career, and not just, hey, did you have a good career if you got to play through? But guys that had awesome college careers, guys that got a chance to play through our programs into professional baseball, guys that got a chance to play in the big leagues. Like, yeah, we want to win and we want to develop, but the way that we get there is by like our day to day, like our quality of life, and our guys walking away from the field, our guys walking to the field fired up about what they get to do that day. And do guys walk away feeling like, I got better? That was a good quality. Like, not are you happy or do you feel good, but like, I got pushed, I got challenged, like I got better. Like I'm moving in the right direction. And on days when it ain't going right, or when I have failed, and like when things are hard and we need to put guys in position where they're going to fail and where things are going to be hard, like, do they feel like they got a group that like really cares about them and supports them and is willing to fight with them through that fight to get better and to get something out of this time? So I think we really try and sell out to, the process. I think Saban has done a really good job of getting that to be infiltrated in all different, collegiate programs across the country, regardless of sport. But I think for us, like the success that we get at the end has to be manifested through the day-to-day quality, like the time that we invest in the guys and the time that we're trying to get our guys to invest in themselves, because we only get to impact them. Like you guys talked about, like the memories you're making are the memories, like they're way more like we get them for a couple hours a day. They got X amount of hours that they're awake, and sometimes just whatever you have to feel like you're helping them with their quality of life at the time that they're there, and also getting them to invest in themselves and their quality of life, baseball wise, socially, whatever, when they're not there. You have to create, a really good environment, a healthy environment that allows them to feel like, at the end of their 4 years here, they felt like they got a home for life.
Yeah, the process I think it gets lost in the recruiting. Like it's the recruiting process. And I think a lot of families and kids go through it they want this instant gratification. And a lot of kids, 99% of kids really need to work through the process, constant development, showing up every day, being able to have a bad day and bounce back from it because it's inevitable. Like that's such a key part of how people go through this. And it doesn't change when you get to college. Like getting to college is the beginning of learning how to work hard, because no matter how hard a kid works in high school, no matter how many good people he has around him, when you get to college, it's a culture shock. Immediately when you get there, you got 22-year-olds who've been lifting weights for 4 years. The ball's moving faster. Everybody's bigger. You've never really practiced before. Like there's a big transition there. And for kids who are going through the process now, if you can learn how to work and show up every day, even when you don't feel great, it's going to serve you so well when you get to college, because you're already going to have a little bit of an understanding of what it takes to be a part of a program. Like you're talking about, like, it's not individuals. It's a group of people working towards end goals. And with travel ball culture, a lot of it becomes very individual. With baseball, when we keep talking about this, when you get to college, it's wins and losses. And you need to understand how to operate within a pitching staff, how to carve out a role, how to be a part of an offense, how to be a contributor any way that you can. Like even the kids who don't play every day, they're impactful to your program. And it's such a different atmosphere, and it's an awesome atmosphere. But there's a lot to be expected of players when they get to a college campus, and how you have to go about your business in order to perform and be able to compete.
No doubt. I mean, it's one of the coolest, but it's still in 2024, one of the only places where you can get a group of guys, as much technology as surrounds our field these days, like practice games. Those are one of the only places these days where you can get a whole group of 18 to 22-year-olds, hell, 42-year-olds to be without their phone for an extended period of time and just be like invested in whatever they are doing individually or what the group's doing. Like, a big reason why baseball is what it is. And like the core memories, I've watched Inside Out and Inside Out 2 the last couple nights. So I'm stuck on the core memory stuff. My wife has been giving me a ton of heat for that. Like I'm pretty jammed up on like, anyway, we can go, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. Great movies, well done, but has also really made me overthink a lot of things that I do in my life. But like the core memories that we make growing up, and why we start to have these attachments to these games, to this game of baseball, any sport really, but this game, as we're talking about it, is the things that you get to do with other people, right? Like how these connections are made, and like the things that you got to do in the game as it impacted a team. Like it's really hard. I mean, I don't know if you can do it. I guess you can. It's really hard to get goosebumps with something you do yourself. Like you get goosebumps a lot of times by watching what other people do that you're connected to, right? Like watching a teammate do something, watching somebody make a play, watching somebody come up big in a moment, like that celebration, like those are the memories that you take, right? Like the dog piles, like the walk-offs, all that stuff, the celebrations, like that all gets amplified because you have put a stake into something that's far greater than what you're doing individually. Now, part of what you have to do, and listen, we're all trying to get to the end goal of our careers, and that's great. And we should be working towards that. But like, your memories are made. The core stuff is usually comes down to what you're doing as a part of a group, right? Like we, even as coaches, like, we're as good as the staffs that we're a part of, right? And the guys, like, we can win a bunch of games, but like, if we don't like the staffs we're on, or we're not making connections with the guys that we get a chance to coach, then like, those are some hollow end games, right? I guess that's kind of what Omaha's kind of taught me, that run that team made, and me getting a chance to be a part of that, and kind of take some steps back and realize, okay, what is this? What have I learned? What's this teaching me? It's like, man, like, you gotta love who you're around. And that usually it makes the difference. And so when you talk about fits, when you're talking about trying to figure out in the recruiting process, like, fit is one of the most commonly used terms, and also probably one of the vaguest terms, right? Because everybody's got a different concept of what fit means. And then there's these layers of, this is what I'm willing to admit I'm going to say out loud the right fit means to me. But am I also being honest with myself? Is my family being honest? Am I being honest? And like, what I'm internally telling myself, is that also what I'm telling other people, right? Like, what I'm actually looking for in a college experience. And that's obviously something that makes all of our jobs, challenging as recruiters, for you guys trying to help be the conduit and bridge the gap for players and families into college programs. It's challenging. It's a challenge for families, right? To really be willing to kind of have a concept of, like, to really strip it down and say, hey, what is my son, daughter, what do they want out of this experience these next couple of years? And how do we boil it down in the process to actually get that information and get all of that to us, so that we can make a really informed decision.
Yeah, I think that you're hitting the nail on the head on how nuanced this entire process from the recruiting standpoint is. And I think that you said something earlier, and I'm going to go back to it because I found it extremely interesting. And let me back up. I found it interesting because I think it's something that doesn't really get said a whole hell of a lot in the recruiting process, nor as coaches do we talk about it a whole hell of a lot outside of our teams. And when you said, like, creating a culture in which it's okay to fail, and, I'm going to be in there with you, and like, we're going to figure this out. That's something that, if you're going through the recruiting process, like, you want to hear that from the coaching staff it is of the school that you might eventually want to land at. Because this game is, and we all know this game is incredibly difficult to play. And at some point in time, I don't care who you are, there's very few guys that do not struggle in the college game when they get that. At some point in time, you're going to struggle. And what does that look like? Because at the end of the day, like, when we're talking about 7-ish% of players that are going to go play college baseball, it's probably a tick higher with NAI and JUCO, but it is a small percentage of guys that are going to go play Division I baseball. And, specifically, with you at ODU, like, you're in an unbelievable conference. It's super tough. Like, you're going to have to be good, really good, to play college baseball at that level. But you're also going to fail, and understanding that is okay. And creating a culture and a program in which, like, hey, like, you're going to fail, but like, we're going to get to work and figure out how we can fail less and fail better. And the other one, like, the fail forward, right? Like, if you're going to fail, like let's learn from it and figure out a way that we can learn, use this experience to be able to get better. And I think so many kids nowadays, especially younger kids, and I saw it towards the back end of my coaching career, like, when they fail because they haven't necessarily failed a lot in their baseball careers, because they're playing college baseball, which just by definition, you're an outlier. You're in the less than 10% that are going to go play in college. So the likelihood of you having really faced a whole hell of a lot of adversity or failed a significant amount isn't that high. Like, are there guys? Yes, there are. However, the vast majority probably haven't. So what does that look like? Because when all of a sudden you get to college, and we've all seen this in the fall, you got that freshman arm who is pretty good, and everyone knows that he's pretty good, and he throws his little rinky-dink slider that sits middle and doesn't spin, and it's just a cement mixer, and the 3-hole guy hits it about 410 feet, and it's like, hey buddy, welcome to college baseball. And what do you do in that moment? And we've all had this conversation multiple times where the next pitch, we're just nibbling and we're not throwing pitch. We're trying to edge the strike zone instead of just getting back into it. And it's hey man, home runs are going to happen. Just get back in there. We'll talk about it afterwards. Just get back in there, throw a fastball in, see what we can do, make something happen. And I think when you to your point, when you create that, and I think you want to look for that in the recruiting process, because it's hey, you have to understand that you will fail in college. It is an inevitability. It's going to happen. But how you respond to that, and then the culture in which you're placed in, how is that handled? And I think that's not I thought that was a brilliant thing to say, and I wanted to talk about it for a minute, because it is something that we all deal with as coaches, and something that I don't necessarily you pull the thread on a whole hell of a lot in the recruiting process, but it goes hand in hand with this is what we do from a development standpoint. Oh, by the way, you're going to mess up. It's okay. You're not going to get absolutely hammered here unless it's and we all have this, it's the same thing for 3 years. You might get jumped after 3 years, but your freshman year, the likelihood of you getting jumped on something, probably not that high, because the learning curve is so steep, and you're probably focused on, I need to throw strikes. Because I'm not throwing strikes. And then you forget, what am I supposed to do on a bunt D? Oh my God, am I supposed to be at third, covering third on this double? Or am I supposed to be at home because there's a guy all of that stuff, the game speeds up, and it's you want to be in a place. My point in all of this is that you want to be in a place where you can fail, but you're going to fail forward, and it's going to be okay at the end of the day. That's the culture that you're looking for.
You're trying to find a place where they're going to use your failure to help you level up.
Yes.
And I think that's you can't, freshman year is hard for 100% of freshmen, whether you play your sport or not. I think everybody kind of if we're really being honest with ourselves, where we are as freshmen, at that age and that transition from high school to college, again, no matter where you are in America, what you're doing that first year, you trying to your whole identity is getting challenged to its core of who I am as a person, what makes me who I am, how I treat other people, how I connect. And then if I'm an athlete, I got to do all that stuff in a new place, and I got to go perform at a high level. And I'm also doing this. Now I've just bottlenecked all the best players in the country, and I'm in that bottleneck. So, we kind of,
and you're likely in a program, not to cut you off, but you're likely in 99.9% of programs, everyone's going to look at you hey man, awesome what you did in high school, but we don't care. We want guys who are here to help ODU win, or help William & Mary, or help RPI. What are you going to do for us?
Yeah.
And I think that adds a layer for some guys when they hear that all the time of damn man, this is a lot.
And I think the challenge that we have is again, this is more of a byproduct piece. What we push, what we try and push is when guys get in here, whether they're a freshman, junior college transfer, 4-year transfer, whatever, the first thing we got to do is learn them. Who are you? What makes you good? And I think we have a fairly defined system in terms of how we our approach on the mound, our approach offensively, what we look for, what we try and identify. But part of what we look for is outliers, right? Okay, guys, we're not very cookie cutter with let's just say from a pitching side of things, we're not super cookie cutter. We look for, if you have a different look that we think is unique and we can kind of help play up your strengths, then you're of interest to us. But when you get here, we're trying to understand you, what makes you good, what you're comfortable with, what is out, what things that we're trying to get you to understand that's out of your comfort zone. And then we gotta sell out to getting you to play to your strengths, to play to your skill set. The lowest hanging fruit is usually not attacking the weaknesses, but attacking your strengths and getting you to groove those patterns, right? To groove those fundamentals. And that's the best way forward to help us most immediately, in year one of you being here. So it's interesting because yes, you are now having to help a team. Like, what are you going to do to help us win? But in our opinion, the best way to help us win is to be you. Like, we got to coach you at an individual level and then apply that to the group. Like we got to get you to like build your skills as you are, and then sell out to the group in terms of like what the standards are, what the expectations of behavior are, right? Like, that's the collective. And that's off the field behaviors. That's work behaviors. Heck, we talk about it all the time. Like, one of the important points that we bring up, and there's this really awesome moment, that I bring up a lot. But like, one of the things that really catches a pitcher at any level, like a call that doesn't get made, like you absolutely, you throw a pill 2-2, like catch the third of the plate, it gets balled. Mm-hmm. You like, what's your response on that next pitch? Can you gather yourself in that 10 to 15 second block between pitches and just make the next pitch? Or is that last pitch going to leak onto the next one? Is it going to bleed out all over the next, ball that you throw? Guy doesn't make a play behind you. What are you going to do? Guy, like, you absolutely beat a hitter and that guy dumps a ball in at, exit velo is 70 miles an hour and that guy dumps it in the Bermuda Triangle behind, first, second, and right field. Like, what do you do? Also, like, you think you make a good pitch, guy absolutely barrels it in the gap, whether it gets caught or not. Like, all of those moments, like, are one now these days captured on video, right? So we have a chance to be able to kind of roll it back and see it. But like, those are all challenges to your ability to work from one moment to the next. And like, those are toughness moments. And like, we try and study that. We try and address it. Like, Ryan Moore, who's one of our, director of player development now. We have 3 alum. We're actually super lucky. We got 3 alum, 3 pitchers. Don't tell the hitting coaches don't like when I bring this up, but we have 3 pitching alum that are helping us out on staff, and director of operations, player development, camp coordinator roles. And we're super lucky to have them. They all pitched in the program. They're all back. They want to, kind of start building their careers from here. And they've been fantastic resources. John Keem, Ryan Moore, Brandon Pond, all 3 of those guys are studs. And so they have, but with Ryan Moore, he was basically our arm, like our starter in 21 at Old Dominion when we finished 11th in the country, won Conference USA. We were the 11th seed nationally, but because our facility wasn't quote unquote regional ready, we ended up being the 1 seed, taking it down to South Carolina when they were the 2, right? So we ended up playing South Carolina in the 1-0 game, whatever inning was, middle innings, runner on first. It's a 1-0 game. We get Rhino gets gets whoever gets a ground ball to second baseman, boots it, like kind of misses it, tries to, tag the runner as he's going by, pops out of his glove. Now we got runner at first and second, 1 out, hard to order coming up. Like, it's like, those are the times, like, and Ryan and I have had conversations in earlier years about, he used to be like a palms up guy, right? Like, he'd be a guy that, like, somebody didn't make a play, like, he'd be like, and we used to just kind of, I used to wear him out about it. Like, go in, like, we're going to watch you do this. We're going to watch you work through this. And you're going to decide what you want to be, like, how you're going to grow from this or not. And to his credit, like, it's as mentally tough a dude as I've gotten a chance to coach. Like, I'll put him up against any of the guys I've had at any of my stops. When Trice makes that error, you see on the video, instead of like Trice throws him the ball back and Trice turns around, starts walking to, back to second to his position. You can see Rhino like calling for him, trying to get his attention. Now there's 8,000 screaming Gamecocks fans, chomping at the bit because they think they got us now, right? And what ends up happening in that game is Rhino like calls him 2 more times until he finally gets his attention and basically calls over to him like, hey, I got you. We're going to pick you up here. Like, so like one, he's saying that to acknowledge, to make sure that guy, that Trice knows like, hey, I got you here. We're good. Like, I'm not going to take it with me. Right. Negatively. And then the other part is it helps Trice be able to kind of move on too. Right. Like I got like in that moment where you couldn't feel any more alone and somebody who in theory looks like you let down, like he's going to help you out. Next 2 batters, like punch out. Like Rhino gets out of the jam. Most expressive I've ever seen him on the mound. We ended up going on and winning that game. And that was one of my favorite, maybe all-time moments that I've had in coaching, because it really personified a lot of what we try and like challenge our guys with their growth as, you know, as players, but as people, in these, like, you want to get better. Like, these are the things you're going to have to get better with. It's going to be with shapes. It's going to be with execution. It's going to be command, but it's going to be like your ability to move from one pitch to the next and be able to operate in that space at a high level and be super competitive. And oh, by the way, like who was up next? It's like a sports center. Like, you know, who led off the next inning? Trice. You know what he did? Double. Leads off the next inning with double. Like that connectivity is real. Like, I know it's anecdotal. I don't have objective information to be able to support that, but like those interactions, like the way that happens, like that's super tangible. And that's usually a commonality that you see in a lot of really good teams. And it's hard. I'm not saying I certainly we don't get that right every year. It's not a perfect system. You need all that stuff is only as good as the personnel that you have. Right. So you can teach all this cool stuff you want and empowering stuff. If you don't have the right awesome dudes to make it operate, to make it work, it's not going to play as well. But when you do have the right guys, and that's why the recruiting piece is so critical. When you have the right guys and you have the right skill levels and the right mindset, like that's when this stuff can be really fun.
It is anecdotal, but I think like when you coach long enough, and you've been in for 20 years, I was in for 16, Andy was in for 11, like, you know that's not necessarily anecdotal. Like, you know,
no, man, there's patterns. It's human behavior patterns. It's patterns.
The amount of times, like, and I can think just the last 10 years at RPI, like the last 5, 6-ish, like we legitimately put a heavy emphasis on playing BP live. And like, I would take my time and like, we would play it live. And the first couple, like, you know, it takes a little while, but by the time like we really started getting it rolling, like you got dudes laying out in BP trying to get to as many balls as they possibly can. And then that carries over into games. Obviously, that's your hope. But like, you start to notice like pitchers don't start getting mad about balls that fall in or a hit they gave up, because like dudes are just flying all over the field putting bids on stuff, and it's like, well, they're working for me. I got to work.
We're in it together. Like,
the bargain here.
I want to pick him up. Like,
right.
Guy went all out for me. I want to return the favor. I think that's one of the fun parts is like when we see a guy, whether it's in the inter squad or in game, like guy doesn't make a play, like there's acknowledgement, like there's eye contact, like that stuff's like, I don't know. That's real. Like, I know it sounds super foo-foo, but like it's real.
There's something to it, because like we did have a handful of guys that were kind of hands up guys on some things. And then when we started doing it every single day and it starts to carry over, then like 99% of that stuff went away to where it was like, all right, like dudes are like, everyone here is trying to lay out and put noses on baseballs. Like if it falls in, it falls in. Like it's like we did everything we could to not give up a hit. And like, the flip side to it is too, like you have to at least acknowledge with your guys, like, yo, hits happen, errors happen. Like we're gonna make mistakes. And to that story, like how do you respond to that and then pick up somebody who did make that mistake? Because it's gonna happen. Like you're never, you know, you can play clean baseball all you want. Like this kid, like it's too hard. You're gonna throw a ball away. You're gonna misfield the ball. Like, man, I watched Andy misfield 8 billion balls in my life. Like it's, you know, but on the same hand, Andy's one of the best shortstops I ever played with / seen at the college level. Like the dude could flat out pick it. You know,
well,
so like,
to your point earlier, like he had to fail at some of that to get better at it. Like right. you had to be like you got, in order to in order to be awesome and to level up, you got to go through it. You got to work through that stuff. And I think
I've told this story on this podcast many times. Like my freshman year, we were doing, I don't even know what was going on. I was calling a game behind the home plate and Andy is just screaming at shortstop for me to figure it out. And the game spun up on me. Like, I don't know what is going on. And I'm like, figure it out. Like, what the hell am I supposed to figure out? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing back here right now. Like, they should not let me call this game right now. I'm 18 years old in like my first fall inter squad. Like, I literally do not know what's going on.
I do not know.
Just screaming at me to figure it out. And then like, as you get older and you start to realize like what is going on, it's like it's funny because you look back and you're like, man, like, I had no clue what I was doing. Like, I'm just calling fastballs away left and right to the middle of the lineup, and dudes are just absolutely barreling baseballs off a guy who shouldn't be throwing fastballs away.
There's probably some conspiracy. I'm sure they were getting you under the table later. Like, that's probably what Andy was telling you.
I was like, God, like, what is going on here? Yeah, and then like same thing, like my first time I did double cuts in practice, like, yo, I messed up every single one. I had no concept of a double cut ever. We never ran a double cut in high school. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I'm screaming two. Like, there's no two call for anybody who's listening to this. And I've said this before, but take this to heart. There's no two call on a double cut. Like, no, the ball is not going to second base. The key is if there's a runner on first, it's either going to third or it's going to home. There is no two call. And I'm just screaming two. And everyone's like, what is this kid doing? I'm like, I don't know. I've never done this before. Like, maybe we can throw him out. Like, no, bro, it's an assumed double. Like, no, we're not throwing anyone out there.
No,
I had no idea. And like, I was,
you got to go through it.
I was fortunate enough, and especially in 2005, but like throughout my entire career playing, like we had really good teams and good years. Like my freshman year, we went to the LSU regional. Like I came up with guys who were like, yo, this is what you need to do. Like, and there was no one, I got busted on. But like, it was I never felt like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me and I'm just going to crawl into a hole and die. It was more like, okay, like, what do I have to do here to figure this out? And people were there to help me. And we had a coaching staff that did that too. So like, it was beneficial for me. And like, I wouldn't have coached for 16 years had I not had that experience and at least been able to like learn all of those things to then get into coaching to do those things, because the same thing restarts when you coach. Like we all know this, like you get into coaching and like you think you have it all figured out. And like year one, you get to the end, you're like, yo, I know nothing about anything when it comes to baseball. Like I thought I was the smartest baseball person ever. I'm the dumbest. Like I need to learn a lot more about all of this if I'm going to make this a career. And like I do think, it's an ego thing. It's a leadership thing. It's all of that stuff that goes into this. But I think like when you can find yourself in a position or in a program where you are allowed to fail and you are allowed to grow and figure those things out with help, it ultimately is going to help you out in whatever it is that you decide to do. If you want to stay in coaching, you want to go into life, like, because more bad stuff's going to happen. And if you can figure out that stuff early on, the more successful you're going to find yourself being later on in life. And I think ultimately, as we're former coaches, you're still in it, like that's your end game. Like, yeah, we want to win a lot of games and we want to have a lot of success on the field and we want to put it to people, but like we want our kids to leave and have an unbelievable experience and be like, you know what? I learned a lot more here than I ever really bargained for, and it's going to help me out in my entire life.
Yeah, it's byproduct, right? Like one of the reasons I got a chance to go to, like I said, Ken Herring I was lucky enough, or he was dumb enough to hire me, and it's like the thing that appealed to me about UMass Lowell is that they'd never had a losing season, right? And had 4 really good years there. And then Stony Brook, like 6 years there, like I think we had the most wins. I think we had like 190 something wins. We had the most wins in the Northeast during that 6-year period than anybody else, right? And however many, 70 Division I's there are, however many you want to categorize as the Northeast. And then in our last 5 years, we've been here, like I said, 10 years. Our last 5 years, we've won 183 games here at Old Dominion, which everybody's good. You're going through your top 100. D1 baseball is going through your top 100. And it's like, we're keeping receipts on like like we've been winning a lot, and it's hard. And there's a lot of other really good programs that we're competing against that are also doing similar things. So certainly we're not like special in that regard. However, we believe that like that's something that comes from a process, right? Like those wins, that consistency, and really it starts with Finney at the top, right? He's been here 14 years. He's created an incredible culture of consistency, right? He's allowed, it starts from him to create this atmosphere, this environment every day where guys are able to thrive and build relationships and be able to learn a lot about themselves, right? And have this growth mindset to keep getting better. And when we have guys that struggle with that, we're going to challenge them up. We're going to try and, like Finney's whole thing that we talk about is like, we're going to love you and we're going to try and tell you the truth, and stealing an old Andy McKay line, like we're going to try and tell you the truth as fast as we can. When we feel like we need to be real with you, we're going to try and do it we're going to try and get to the heart of that as quickly as we can, because if we got to wait around, the whole debate of like, all right, do we need to let this guy fail before we work with them? Do you need to, it's like, no, like we got to let them know that we're in it with them. We're going to love them up. We're going to sell out and sell out to them. We got to pour ourselves into them every day as best as we can and get them to feel that connection. And then when they do that, they can be vulnerable enough, hopefully, to be real with you, to give you real feedback, to fail and be able to kind of peel themselves back off the mat and go back to work. I don't think that ability, like everybody's going to fail, but like how you respond to that failure, right? And what the environment is and what you can do to help support that failure. Like, yeah, that's a huge part. So like, I think a lot of that in my time at Old Dominion, like I said, comes from top down with Finney and creating that environment. And I think that leads to a lot of the consistency that you've seen, a program like ours have.
Yeah, I thought it reminds me of, we had Traz on, former teammate of ours, who's the Army head coach. He was like our third or fourth interview. I think Traz was a little mad that he was third or fourth, but we had to get it right before we had him on. But he told a story about how, like, and it's something innocuous as like he forgot the moment, right? It was in practice and kid wasn't getting, they were practicing bunts and stuff. Kid wasn't getting it down. And, Traz kind of jumped. He was a freshman. Traz jumped him and was like, man, like, when are you going to do this when it matters? Like in the Navy game, like at some point, like I need you to do this now. And fast forward 7 months, like they're in a game against Navy, tight game, late in the like 8th inning, and the kid lays down a perfect bunt that doesn't even get thrown out, and they go on to win the game. And he's like, the dugout erupts, everyone's fired up, and they're like, remember when you jumped him in the fall? And Travis was like, no, but I'm glad I did. Like, yes, like hell yeah, showed up in the Navy game and got us the win. And I think so many times, like you're going to get jumped sometimes in college, and like it's not the end of the world. Like I can promise you when you do, like the coach has moved on right after he gets done. But it's also one of those things like as coaches, what certain guys can handle. And look, like Army, I'm assuming the kids at Army can handle a little bit more than some of the other kids out there that we've coached. But, like it's, you're getting coached to the point of like they want to try to get the most out of you every single day. It's not because they're mad at you. It's not like I can promise you I never went home after yelling at someone and being like, I'm gonna lose sleep over yelling at him today. Like, no, I'm trying to get the most out of you. And sometimes with some kids, it is jumping you. Other times it's like, hey, I need to go white gloves here to try to get the most out of this kid. And it's just like, I think like, but when you know that, either A, in the recruiting process, or B, when you get there, that like it's coming from a place of, I just want the most out of you to get you to the best that you can potentially be, you get a lot more out of people. Where, I think like we've changed, probably our generation of coaches, like we're different than the generation that we played for, right?
Oh,
like the generation that we played for, like we just got yelled at all the time, 24/7, 365. Whereas now it's not necessarily, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's changed for the worse. Like we just and I say this with a grain of salt because there's a lot of successful coaches out there who won a lot of games and did a lot of really good stuff by doing what it was they did. I think now we understand more of the human component of like, I can't just yell at everybody all the time. Like, eventually you're just the boy who cried wolf. Like,
right. Or what if there's just like a better way to build a boat?
Yes.
And
1,000% right.
And so like, if there's some exploration of that. And like I said, like, I don't got that right. Like, if you asked me to build a boat right now, we'd all sink in it. So I ain't got the answers, but I think there's an element of like, yeah, like you could just yell because that's what, but like, was that like, I guess you're constantly trying to find separators, right? So like, just because a generation of coaches before just all yelled, does that make it right or wrong? I don't know, but like, if that's all you did, like there has to be more depth to that, right? Like, yes. If everybody could yell, like, okay, but like, are you communicating the right points? Are you doing it at the right times? Are you doing it like, are you like, what message are you getting across? Are those guys like, do we even know if like, just because a generation like our generation could absorb that and not go home and, I don't know, pout or whatever about it, that doesn't mean that it was like
right
good quality, like work. Right. And even now, like, I think there's this perception that you can't coach guys like hard anymore, whatever that means. Like, you can't like get on guys and like you said, jump them, or you can't. I think you can. I think you just like, you absolutely can coach guys hard. I think but they have to know you're in the mud with them.
Yes.
Like, you can't just like show up, coach them, like be whatever. And if they don't feel like you're being vulnerable with them and then get away with it and think you're going to get something out of them, like there's more time invested. Like, I think like the yelling stuff is like that surface level. You could get away with more surface level stuff before. Now, regardless of how you want to do it, there's more depth, but I think the depth creates more quality. And I think it makes for like these relationships that are super genuine. And I think there's a lot more that depending on how you want to do it, right, the nuances of it, then you're hopefully trying to create some separation, right? If you can really make some connections with guys and they can learn themselves and you can kind of help them find their way, then those are the differences between, extending a pitching staff, a couple more guys that have an impact, extending guys off the bench in a lineup, right? Like extending the length of a lineup and being able to guys to play their part and do their role and then be able to make an impact at different moments. Like, that's the stuff where if those guys feel like you're invested in them, they're going to be absolutely invested back into the group. And I think that can be, a real spot of opportunity and I think programs that do well. It's not just like I'm bullish on us as a program and how we operate and the connections we make with guys and how important that is in the recruiting process, because we can't be transactional in the recruiting process because of how much like we base our system day to day on building relationships with our guys, right? Like, that's such a part of how we get our guys in our eyes better, right? How we work through our development processes, how we work through getting our guys to execute in games and being at their best and peak performance. Like, it's very relationship based. Like, it's time intensive. We can't bring in guys that are just here for the ride. Like, we have to feel like those guys that they want that connection, and that, listen, there's some guys that, like, they have to be willing, like we talked about hearing the truth. Like, they got to be willing to work through hearing this stuff, even though they don't want to hear it at that moment. They got to be willing to know that we're trying to give them information that we think helps them. And they got to be able to work with us to try and understand what that means and get them better. So that's a big part of what we look for recruiting wise. It's like, yes, we're looking for skill levels. We're looking for certain archetypes. Like, honestly, like, Andy, you mentioned like Pasquantino. I don't know if there's too many Pasquantinos that are rolling around, Diamond Nation and East Cobb. I think that's a bit of a one-of-one human and player. However, one of the things that we use is when we're recruiting is like, hey, can we comp the guy that we're watching in front of us right now to a guy that's had success in our program before? Is this the type of athlete that we've had success working with? Does he have a certain type of skill set, like the tool set that he has have those types of skills been skills that, or that overall kind of what his bag of tricks, like, is that something that we've had that has success in our program, success at our level, in our league? Like, those are things that we're constantly trying to evaluate. And does he, like, what kind of mind? Like, it's not just like, hey, it's the conversation, but like, we're trying to watch like every, as much as we can behaviorally with how they handle like good moments on the field, how they're handled their, like when, like you guys mentioned earlier, like when they fail, how they come off the field, their interactions. It's not end all be all, but like that's potential valuable sources of information for us to get a snapshot into kind of how they work. We do a ton of Zooms with guys in the recruiting process. So like after the initial phone calls, once we've kind of mutually agreed that, hey, past the first round of interviews, so to speak, right? Like, how are you interested in Old Dominion? Have you done your homework? Have you talked to the people that are in your circle that are giving you advice? Is this a potential option? Do you want to learn more about us? And we've decided after doing our homework, right, on finding out like our conduits, our connection points with you, that we want to continue recruiting you. Let's jump on a Zoom. Let's jump on a Zoom with your parents. Let's get them on a call together. And we use that time, one, so that we can be like, all right, up to this point, Old Dominion's a website, and it's a couple, kind of conversations, and like, let's put some faces to names here. So it gives families, hopefully a kind of a window into our program. It gives them a chance to ask as many questions they want, fire away, and we're going to be as transparent and real as we can. But it's also a chance for us to interview them. Like, we get a ton out of like watching how our prospective student athletes, our recruits, like interact with their parents, right? Like how those little like verbal and nonverbal cues kind of work. That's extremely valuable for us. And so we're constantly kind of like, okay, our initial thoughts, our initial thin slices on what he is as a player, trying to figure out some comps, trying to figure out, does that skill set play to the level or within our program with what our needs are? And then we're really trying to spend time on like the human element, the behavioral stuff, right? The consistency, and the genuine interest. Like, we are a lot of like, once they've crossed the threshold of like, hey, we think he's good enough to play here and he's the right type of kid. Like, another huge factor is like, is he genuinely interested in Old Dominion? Have we done a good enough job of getting him to understand who we are? And that's why we, like, on a Zoom or things like that, we want to be super real, and as honest as we can, because we want them to come here, not just because, we want them to come here because it's a winning program. We want them to come here because we think we do a really good job helping guys get better. We create a really good environment for guys, but like, it's got to be more of a holistic approach or a holistic reasoning. If like, we're not going to apologize for being surrounded by beaches and water down here, right? Like, we're not going to apologize for being 20, 25 minutes from the ocean front at Virginia Beach. But if you're coming down here because we're near the beach, like, that probably ain't a sustainable model. Like, you got to kind of want to be here because of everything that we are and the day-to-day life that you get to have while you're here. And so we do a lot of work, like, again, identifying the character, the skill set, identifying the character, and then trying to get them to understand us as much as possible. Like, we want them to learn us as much as they can, almost more as much as we're trying to learn them, if that makes sense. And the reason we do a Zoom too, the last piece of this is like, if family comes on a visit, it's sensory overload. There's this super condensed amount of time that you're trying to show them everything. Everybody's on their best behavior. You're trying to take in all of this information in one, kind of snapshot. And so there's a lot of opportunities for us to go into Zooms and get some time to spend with families so they can ask some of those initial questions and they can be more prepared going into a visit, right? So now they can kind of soak in some more of this information, get a better feel for what's going on while they're on campus, and not be kind of as overloaded as you typically would if you're like, I like not having to meet parents for the first time, right? Like, it makes for a much better experience when they're in the golf cart taking a ride around campus and spending some time talking to Amy Lynch, our academic advisor. They've already heard me like rant and rave about how awesome she is. right? And what a critical piece of our coaching staff and our program she is. Like she's already gotten the hype train from us going into that meeting. So I think those are all really valuable, important points that we kind of help us navigate, especially now, the nuances of this recruiting landscape.
You said something earlier, and if there's high school coaches or other college coaches who are listening to this, you said something earlier about elevating strengths, and that's the first thing that you focus on. And I think that is such a powerful takeaway for anybody who's starting their coaching career or is in their coaching career and they haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of different coaches, or they haven't had anybody say that. I think the game of baseball, a lot of times, there's two pieces of it. We go to the things that kids can't do as a way to critique, and we rush to coach. And coach usually comes from, I need to change something. And the idea that in a lot of the really good coaches that me and Keith have good relationships with, they come from this same angle. And I don't think it's by accident that they look for what guys do well and they try to build on those while simultaneously attacking some of the weaknesses. And I don't know if we need to expand upon it anymore. I just thought that that's something that really stuck out to me beyond what Keith hammered home was, I think it's so important for guys to understand it when you're speaking with a coach and you're going through this process. If that coach comes on and you start talking to him and the only thing he's focusing on is all the shit that he's going to change about you, that's a red flag. Because he probably hasn't taken the time to really recognize, like, this is what this kid does really well. And this is why I like this kid. And I want to be able to build upon what he does well and elevate what that kid does well. And I think sometimes as coaches, specifically as young coaches, and I know I was guilty of this.
Yeah, we all are.
Is you rush into trying to make changes with kids instead of taking the time to figure out, like, what does this kid do really well? Do I really need to make a change? Does he have to add that third pitch right now? Or can we find a role for him where we can just really just hone in on, like, hey, you can really sink the ball and you can run the ball off the plate glove side. We don't need a third pitch right now. We can work on that slowly, but let's get you in a place where those two pitches play. And now you can find a role on the staff and we can build confidence. We can get innings under your belt. And for me, that's something that sticks out as it took me a while to figure that out. Honestly, I probably didn't figure it out until I got to William and Mary with Murph, where one of the best things you can do is just get to know a kid.
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm going to follow up with. It's like, you got to, like, they have a DNA, right? Like they have their own fingerprints. Like, you don't need to put your fingerprints on everybody. Like, I think that was probably, I go back to, the 2012 run, like the Omaha run, that validated a lot not validated, but I mentioned the perspective. Like, for me, like, I don't got to go chase it. I don't need to, help manage my ego. And the reason to manage my ego is because, like I mentioned a week later, like, we're out at Diamond Nation, like Panucci and I, like, we're out, and this story's been circulated enough now, but like we're sleeping in the Diamond Nation parking lot, like, a week later off of Omaha, because we didn't have budget for, go get hotels in Jersey. Like, so, like, we're sleeping in, like, he brings his blow up mattress. He's sleeping in his Tacoma, and, like, I'm sleeping in my car. And you're just like, dude, like, this, if you're going to go about the, hey, it's got to be about, like, we learned pretty fast, like, it ain't about us. Like, so when you're working with guys, like, one, for us as coaches, like, are we in a really good environment? Do we get to work with people that, again, both players and coaches that you want to work with? And I think it's really important. It does not, like, you matter much less. You are not special in this. Like, and so your job is to try and learn the people around you as best you can and be as good a sounding board for them as being good as a navigator for them in their careers. And ultimately, like, the best thing we can do for our guys is to get them to learn how to take ownership of their careers so that they don't need you anymore. So that hopefully by the time that they get to their junior year, their senior year, and they move on, either they get a chance to play through the program into professional baseball, or they've graduated. Like you've helped them learn themselves. And some of that comes with like, hey, yes, we're going to sink it and we're going to slide it. And like, that's it. We don't need anything else right now because it's electric. Like we have I came with one of our guys, Kellen Davis, last year, at 30 appearances for us through 75% sliders. Like he came back from the summer before, like spent 60% of his bullpen throwing changeups because that's what he learned in the summer. And we like sat him down like, Kellen, if you're going to pitch here, like it ain't going to be with that. Like we got to know what makes you good. Like you have an outlier pitch. He's got an outlier breaking ball. And he led our team in wins last year out of the pen, quite honestly. Like with like throwing a pitch that everybody knew was coming. It was hilarious watching guys like go to the scouting report and being like, no, and you know what they're telling their guys going up there is going to happen. He was still able to be convicted enough himself, know stuff like was going to work, and stayed behind it, stayed true to it. And he had a ton of success with that. Right. Like again, yeah, being able to know this is what is going to help this guy and be able to like be convicted in that and get him to be convicted in that. And also to be able to know like, all right, this guy's got a certain type of profile, right? This is where some of the technology really can come into play to help us now, right? There's some guys that we think, hey, like whether it's, the easy way, pronate or supinate or bias, like guys that are built a certain way, right? Have a certain arsenal. Yes, you want to be able to play up the strengths of what they are, but they also might be able to, once you learn them, like we had a freshman who very recently, like within a session or two, picked up on a cutter. Like he kind of like profile, has some really good feel. Like, hey, he hasn't even played it. Like we're doing our first inter squads this week. And it was kind of like halfway through fall, like group work. And we're like, this kid might be built for a cutter. And so we go back and forth. I'm like, all right, do we just throw something out? Or do we need to wait till the end of the fall? What do we do? Like, I think this kid was ready for it. He was prepared for it. He was built kind of mentally and physically for it. Within 2 sessions, he picked it up. We went live ABs the other day. It might have been his best pitch. So like, I think that's part of like our job is to, and again, I'm also going to screw that up. Just many times I'm giving you like the good examples. There's also plenty of times when it's like, all right, well, we didn't get that one right. But if your process as a coach is based on trying to learn the kid first, trying to learn where they're at, learn what they can absorb, right? Like if they're sponges, like they might be totally soaked. You try and give them something else, like it might just trickle right out. Like, or hey, like they're at a point right now where they need this and we're ready to give that to them. Like being able to not just know maybe their DNA and what they're built for, but also like the timing of that and when they can absorb some information that can be really helpful for them.
And it's an art, not a science. Like you can have all the data, but to your point, the timing of it, how does that conversation go? Like you're going to approach the conversation differently with different kids because you know how that kid's going to take it. Like for the kid who threw all the sliders, like seems like it was pretty cut and dry. Like, hey man, if you want to pitch here, this is what we need to do. For other kids, it might be a slower bleed where you're going to give them that information in smaller chunks. And how you approach it with kids, and like that's the art of coaching that honestly it comes with learning. It comes with, we're talking about it at the beginning here, like it comes with failing because you've done it with somebody else and it didn't quite work out that right way, or you're going to approach it a little bit different. And, for coaches too, it's a lot of being able to understand what has worked really well in the past, whether it's from an evaluation perspective, like you're talking about the profile. And I think that's a huge thing for people to hear, that you're going to go back in your Rolodex of players and say, that kid reminds me of him. Well, he reminds me of Carter Trice. Well, last time I checked, that kid was a pretty good player. If that kid's checking those boxes, you're going to move forward with them, and how coaches view that. And you're looking at it from, can this kid be in our program? Can he help us win in our conference? Can he help us win a regional? Does he have the ability that we need in order to take us where we want to go? And I know the character piece, and you've hit on it, but I know it's big for you guys, and I know it's big for a lot of programs, but are you getting the right type of kid? And I think that's the hard thing. And I think it's the hard thing for players who are going through the process to fully understand that sometimes a coach, you might just not be a fit there. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not a really good player, but you guys are looking for certain things that you value at Old Dominion, and you're going to lean on your gut instinct and the information that you've gathered in order for you to make the best decision you can for your program.
And yeah, like we're always trying to learn from like our mistakes, right? Things that, like our successes, but are some mistakes. Like we're trying to constantly, like we screwed up a bunch. Like, you know, like you're constantly trying to, I think that's like culturally, like we impress that upon our guys, but we got to do that as coaches. We got to be like, all right, like I think like as messy as COVID was from a college coach's standpoint, it also proved for me to be one of the most valuable times from a professional development standpoint. Like I've had as much fun coaching the last 4 years, you know, as maybe at any other time from a growth standpoint. Like just the explosion of technology and the ability to objectively measure information, and then be able to digest it in a way, like to learn it. Like one, I got to learn it and I'm still learning it. Like I ain't great at all of it yet. I'm still trying to figure it out, but being able to have access to it, be able to create a system for it that we learn it, and then also be able to help educate our guys on it. And then figuring out what information is really valuable to get to them and what we want to make sure we present that, like, hey, you have access to everything we have, but like what you're going to have, like what's the first layer? And then what do we hold back and be able to kind of like pick and choose what we think is next in terms of like how to help educate you on yourself. So I think a lot of that's, you know, us learning from us continuing to grow. It's the same thing in recruiting. Like I think now more than ever for us, because of where the different directions that we're being pulled, it's not just high school anymore, right? It's high school, it's junior college, and it's transfer. We still feel like the bread and butter, the foundation of our program is going to be, we want to build it from the high school ranks. Like that is still the choice that we are making in the numbers. Like our numbers in terms of our 24, 25 class are essentially the same as what they were before all the kind of the rules went down here. The only difference might be that from a scholarship standpoint, the only nuances right now that we're still working through is like guys that we might have said this was a really valuable non-roster or non-scholarship type of player. You know, that guy is a little bit like we're in a holding pattern with those types of guys in terms of filling out the roster. But in terms of like guys that we're trying to build at the high school level, like scholarship wise, like those numbers, we're kind of holding true with that. And we want to continue to invest in the high school level. But for us, it becomes even more important now that we find connection points, anchor points with people that we know and trust, that know these players and know these families and can vouch for them. And realistically, like you said it, like, hey, like Fitz, like we try and be as real in the process as we can, not so that we find out whether he's a good fit, but like we want them to know, be like, hey, Old Dominion's like that's a fit for me. Like that's exactly what I'm looking for. Like, hey, that ain't it. Like that's not the fit for me. That's okay. But it's also, I think, really valuable that families, that guys going through this process, because it's as messy as it's ever been, that they have some people outside of their direct family sphere of influence that can help give them some reality, that can help give them some honesty, and can help give them some genuine direction in terms of how to navigate this. I think now more than ever, I think you know, it's the market's still the market. If you're a really good player, you will have a market for yourself. But in terms of the nuances of maybe what levels, what direction, the timing of when guys are getting recruited, there's so much that is turned upside down now in the recruiting process. Going out and just showcasing yourself in the summer and assuming that is going to play out as it always has, or as you've heard, you know, friends and family before you, like that's all changed. You know, we're having to go and split our time. You know, there's less recruiting time. The recruiting windows are less than they've ever been. you guys remember back in the Siena days and William, like every weekend that was recruiting available, there was a guy on the road. Like I remember being at Stony Brook and there really wasn't a week. Like if you didn't go out for a weekend, you felt incredibly guilty. Like, hey, got to go to that All-Star game in Connecticut. Like, I don't care what the traffic is. Like, we got to go up there. Like, got to hit it up. Like, got to be there. There was never a time when you felt like, and now the windows have shrunk, and that's good for me. Like father of 3, married 11 years, like the recruiting windows are healthier for my family. But from a recruiting standpoint, like the windows are less, and you're recruiting now junior college and transfer portal. So your time is split. And so the boots on the ground time to go evaluate guys is less. You're only getting 5 weekends in the fall, right? So like Fort Myers is taking on even more value because that's one-stop shopping for a lot of guys. And if they're not at Fort Myers, like that's like obviously we got to make decisions in terms of like, all right, are we picking another weekend or 2 to go out and see some other high school guys? You also want to be at home and be with your own players and help the development process there. So my point to all that is it makes it harder for us to go out and recruit guys if we don't have people that we know, that we trust, that have a feel for us as a program and what we're looking for, helping be a connection point, right, to these players, helping a conduit, helping a bridge to get us better acclimated to, are we finding the right type of guys, but also like helping these families, get a better understanding, because again, the timelines are just going to be different. And the more that families and players can get educated from people that didn't raise them, that aren't emotionally attached to them, so to speak, the more they're going to get real feedback that's going to long-term, maybe it's not exactly what they want to hear in the short term, but long-term is going to benefit them. I think those roles, guys, like the roles that you guys are playing right now in the overall landscape, like I don't think it's never been more valuable. It's never been like the roles that you are creating, the information that you are offering, the mentorship that you're providing, like the education piece of it. It's never been more valuable than it is right now.
I mean, that's exactly why we bring guys like you on this, because you guys are in it every day. And like for someone like you to be able to articulate that, and we talk about it, but like you need to have some people in your corner that can help you through this, because it's not easy. Like there's so many good players. Like I think high school baseball from a pure talent perspective is better than it's ever been. And when you start to factor in the transfer portal in junior college and the condensed roster sizes, like it's just continuing to get more competitive. So the earlier on you're getting good information, the quicker you can pinpoint places that are a fit from an academic perspective, from a financial perspective, from a playing perspective. You're just stacking those chips in your favor, and you're giving yourself a better chance to be successful in this process. And, if obviously, it's something that we do, but it's something that we do because, we enjoy it. And it's pretty cool when you're on the other side of it and, you get a call from a mom or dad and they thank you for all the time that you put in, even though you probably had some tough conversations along the way because that kid ended up being in the right place. It's pretty fulfilling, but I mean, it's super competitive and it's, you want to give yourself the best chance possible. And to your point, like the people that you surround you with, like this kind of takes us back to the beginning of the conversation around like the people you're with and the experiences you have. Like it's no different when you're going through this. Like you don't need somebody who's always just going to tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes you have to have that tough conversation. And as long as you understand that it's coming from a place of, we're trying to get you to where you want to go, those conversations become a lot more easy. They become easier. They're more tangible. They're more meaningful. And ultimately, it's what leads kids and families to success in this process, is that you have some people that are willing to help you through it and be honest with you and help you navigate it. And
how cool is it you guys as former teammates get to rock and roll doing this together? Like it's phenomenal. Like it's super cool. And then like to be able to have guys with your experience, right? Like, so you guys have your own relationship, then like both been in the coaching side, like again, having people in your corner to be able to disseminate all the multitude of like what's real and what's not going on in college athletics. Like, we don't know. Like, nobody knows. Anybody that wants to pretend that they do, like, I mean, everything's in court right now. So we're just guessing, right? And there's a lot of people out there that are unsure. So like, having people that are still, that have had the experience that you've had in the profession, but then are also staying connected to understanding and staying up to date on all of the things that are developing and growing, and being able to filter what's real, like what's probable, what's unlikely as it's happening in real time. That's the part where I think you guys are creating a really powerful service for a lot of families, because if you're trying to figure that out on your own, like we're still, like, we're in it every day and we still don't know. So you guys can, being able to offer this to families and to players as they navigate it, like, man, that's an incredibly valuable resource that a lot of families, quite honestly, that they need, because like we talk about, like our two main jobs are developing guys to help us win games and recruiting future guys that we can develop to help us win games. We do it every day, and it's still the hardest part, right? Like the development piece, like you can create a system and there's probability of outcome that you feel pretty good about. Like recruiting, like we have a system too, but like that's a lot more, like you're relying on a lot more, there's a lot more challenges that come with that system. Right. And that's what we do every day. Like if you're a family and this is the first time you're going through it, or even the second time, like that's hard to get it right the first time, right? It's hard to figure all this stuff out. And you're also dealing with us as coaches, like we fancy ourselves the best salesman on the planet. Like we just think we are so hot stuff when it comes to being able to kind of sell us and that's fine. But like you're also, I think what it's really hard for families is that there's a business piece of this, right? You're trying to get your son or daughter, or whoever, but you're trying to get your son to go to college, right? There's a business, there's a logistical piece of this. Unfortunately, it's also like one of the most emotionally charged decisions of not just the kid's life, but of the parent's life. You've been raising this kid in your house for 18 years, and then you're trying to send him off and trying to find the best place for him. And the amount of, like I'm in it, 9-year-old, 6-year-old, 2-year-old, like this, however many years of diapers, like however many years of going through like bedtime routines and morning routines and managing all this different stuff that we love. But like, you're trying to hit this thing. Like there's very few other decisions that you're trying to get so perfectly as the place where my son's going to college. And even though that there's a lot of logistical things that come up in processes that you're like, is that a red flag? Or that doesn't, something about that my gut's not telling me, like people are still get confused on it because you're just managing so many emotions that come with it. So again, being able to find resources that are going to be a little bit more emotionally, detached and are going to be able to provide good context and perspective to the processes that are going on, to that journey from beginning of recruiting towards commitment, towards actually getting to a school and being set up to be successful at that school. Like having some people in your corners, like I said, now more than ever is incredibly valuable.
Well, it's huge. And I think it's why we do what we do now. Like you're still able to be connected to the game and talk to our friends that you spent countless times at Diamond Nation and Baseball Heaven and in hotels till God only knows what time.
2 a.m. at whatever that convention was. I don't remember where we were, but no, that was Nashville. Or
Nashville. It was Nashville.
Was it Nashville? All right,
it was.
There we go.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
And but the other part of it is like doing the podcast, like doing this and having conversations with guys where like you can start to pull the veil back a little bit, because it's at the end of the day, like this is a pretty veiled process, like regardless of what sport it is, but it is a rather veiled process. And I think sometimes like when you have, and whether it's us or you're listening and you're doing it yourself or you're with other people, I don't care, but it's college coaches aren't always like, yes, we're going to tell you the truth, but at the same time, like you have to understand we're recruiting like more kids than we need for the spots we have on our team. Like it's just a numbers game. And I think sometimes people get caught up in like, well, I'm being recruited at this school, and then like, but why am I not getting an offer? Like, well, you're the third shortstop and they only need one, and they have 2 offers out. And if one of those 2 guys take it, like, you have to be prepped to hear that you're not going to that school and you need to change gears into another place. And, you know, I think sometimes that's hard for a lot of people, right? Like, it's, you know, our goal, and we tell this to people all the time, like, you're going to say no more than you're going to say yes, but you also have to be prepped to hear no at these schools, whether it's from them or it's from us, because that's the reality of what this whole process is. Like, you're ultimately looking, and we talked about it earlier, like, you're looking for the right fit, but so are the college coaches. And sometimes it's hard to hear that. Like, you might not be a fit at a certain program because that coach might, like, you might meet you and be like, hey, great kid, like, phenomenal family, but like, I don't know if they're going to fit here. And that, like, that's okay. Like, that's part of this whole journey that you're going through. And I think sometimes people get so discouraged in it because they don't necessarily understand, you know, again, to your point, the business side behind what this is.
And yeah, we're selling, again, like, we are genuinely selling an experience here, right? Like, everybody had an experience in college, but like, you grow up dreaming of what college is. And so the hard part is like, what we're doing, this is what's really tricky, is like, we are, when we talk to kids and when we have them on visits, and we're communicating a vision, right, of their time here on this campus and in this program. And you don't get to do that like halfway. Like, with everybody you recruit, you're trying in theory to sell out and get them as fired up as you can get them, because there's a, you know, certain probabilistic chance that's, you know, hey, this is the guy that we want to go with. And it's hard on those times when, we're recruiting a guy and we found another guy and that guy said yes, and then we're out of that spot, and then we got to go pivot and change gears. That's hard because you're not dealing with, like, I mean, heck, it's hard for adults when they hear like, hey, you don't get this opportunity. Yeah, I applied for this job, I didn't get this job. You think about, everybody like can think about those moments, like, you know, you're however old, you're in your 30s, your 20s, your 40s, you know, imagine when you're 16, 17, like, you're talking about like core memories. Again, this is where Inside Out gets me. It's like, I mean, those are times when, like, I remember going through and like, I can still remember. Now listen, let's not be confused on this for one second. Like, I completely you want to talk about like good guidance. Like, I completely overshot my skis here, but I was convinced I was going to Johns Hopkins out of high school. Convinced. Thought I was like, I went, visited, applied. I was like, I'm in, this is my spot. I love it. Had an incredible visit. Had a blast. Like, I got a C in trig that year. Like, I'm not getting into Johns Hopkins. Like, it's not happening. Like, I'm not getting there. Like, no way. But I led myself to believe, like, I was going there. And it was my senior year. I still remember it vividly. Like, I go and we play down in Florida for like our week. You know, I grew up in Philly, went to Germantown Academy. We do our spring break trip. I come back from the spring break trip. My parents pick me up in the school at GA. I'm in the parking lot, and they hand me a letter from Johns Hopkins, and it's a thin letter, and it was basically like this is what it was, 99, 2000, 99, 2000, graduated 2000. So this is like spring of 2000. It's a letter basically like, hey man, you didn't get in, like, you ain't coming here. And like, that's a core memory. Like, you feel like you failed, right? Like, you feel like all this stuff, like, and that was like, that's the business side. Like, you just like, hey, you can't get bad grades, you know, in math classes and think you're going to go to one of the best schools in the world. Like, that ain't happening. And then their life moves on, right? Like, they don't think any, you know, and you, like, as a 16, 17-year-old, you got to pick up the pieces and be able to move on. Your family, who's tried to do everything they can for you, has got to do the same. Got to try and support you. Also got to push you. Got to get, like, it's hard. So like, as coaches, we're always trying to be empathetic of like those processes, right? And that's why we go back to trying to be as real as we can. Like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're about. This is what we're going to try and do in the process. Like, when we see, even when we're trying to recruit guys at Fort Myers, like coming up, hey, we're going to see you, and it's either going to go one of two ways. We're either going to say, hey, we've seen you, we love you, we're ready to make an offer when you're ready to hear an offer. And then, it's going to be like, hey, we saw you, we're not ready to pull the trigger, but we're not going to stop recruiting you. Just because we're not ready to make a decision now doesn't mean that we're going to stop the recruiting process. And whether that guy ends up coming here or not, who knows? Like sometimes it has worked out. Sometimes most of the time, probably when you go that direction, it doesn't. But we got to try and be as real as we can, because that's a hard, like, again, trying to be empathetic and understanding, like, the challenges that come with a 16, 17-year-old, and the most powerful tool they have is at that point, right? Probably their imagination, right? Because without their imagination, without their vision of playing in college, like, how are they getting motivated to get up and go train and go work and do school and go back and try and have a social life and then go train and keep getting better? Like, without your imagination, without that vision, that dream, that concept of what that college experience is going to be like, how, like, you guys know this, like, that's what kept us going. Like, that's what got us to college. That's what got us into programs that we are super proud to be alums of. Like, that's how you get there. But what comes with that is going to be like, you have to have obstacles in the road. And I think for even parents, like, it's okay. Like, there's enough out there now. It's like, Greg Olson had Greg Olson, the, tight end, right? Who's now, Fox's number 2. Personally, should be Fox's number 1, but that's a different conversation. I don't want to get any Brady haters on me, but like, he's had one of his kids with some serious health stuff, right? I don't know all the details, but I know one of his kids has had a really hard, like, early childhood phase. And so, like, there's some stuff where you got to do hard things. You got to go through hard stuff. Like, that's the reality of, like, being prepared to handle the next phase of your life. Like, your kids are going to have to go through hard things. And so again, like, being able to have parents that are willing to go down that road with them as they navigate this process and handle like, being able to support them when they have conversations, and these kids have conversations that maybe they don't want to hear, that are going to be hard for them. Being able to make sure that they're, like, giving them support, but also, like, continuing to push them and challenge them and keep, like, forcing them to fight through it. And then being able to, again, to find resources where people are going to be like, okay, like, that ain't into the world. Like, that didn't fit. All right, we're going to find something else. It's okay. Like, I think that's probably an underappreciated part of this journey. I think that, to me, like, getting that letter was probably a motivating factor that led me to kind of hopefully get to I ended up at Holy Cross. Great spot. Super lucky. Probably couldn't get in there now. Like, definitely couldn't get in there now. Like, without probably getting a letter like that basically made me think I failed. Like, I probably don't get to, be in that position where I was able to find my way into that type of school and that type of program.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, where early on it seems like a process of accumulation for kids when they go through the recruiting process, but in reality, it's a process of elimination, because you're trying to get to 1. And, like, there are kids who go through this and they've got 10, and that's great. But that itself comes with challenges. How do you figure out what's the best one? But at the end of the day, for the kids who are going through this, like, you're looking for one place that's the right place for you. And you're going to have to say no. You're going to get told no. And it's a part of the process. It doesn't mean that it's not difficult. It doesn't mean that some of those conversations aren't going to be tough. But if you wrap your head around that early, you're going to be more prepared to have those conversations. And you're going to realize that the goal isn't to get recruited by everybody. The goal is to get recruited by a school that's the right place for you, with a coaching staff that believes in you, that is going to be a fit for you and your family academically and financially, location wise. Like, there's so many different things that factor in. And, everybody wants to get recruited by as many schools as possible when it all starts. But at the end of the day, we're trying to find that one place, whether it's Old Dominion or it's Holy Cross or Marist. Like, if you go through the process informed, honest, willing to work for what you're going to get, like, that's the other thing too. Like, college baseball isn't it's a privilege to play, and like you have to earn it. It's not something that gets handed to you. You don't just get to play because you want to play. But if you're willing to do all of that and you have a plan, probably going to be able to find a good place to experience what college baseball is and what you get out of those 4 years, whether you get to play pro ball or whether you don't. Those 4 years in that uniform, on that field, in the weight room, with that coaching staff, with your teammates, that's gold. Like the kids who get to experience that are they're so well placed and so well prepared for the next phase of life, because they're going to go through some things that are tough. They're going to have to be a part of something that's a little bit bigger than themselves. They're going to have to learn. They're going to have to be good teammates. They're going to have to be good people, or else you're just not going to get through those 4 years. But if you get through those 4, you've got something that a lot of people don't have. And it's a superpower when you get into the real world. Once you realize, like, wow, I learned a lot more than how to throw a sinker. Like, I learned how to show up every day. I learned how to be a good teammate. I learned how to treat people with respect. Like, that type of stuff it's so important.
Yeah, like I learned how to play in the sandbox. Like I learned how to like kind of operate with other people. Like and honestly, like with other people that like I didn't pick all like 30 of my teammates, right? Like we all kind of got thrown in here, and you learn like some guys you're going to be tight with, some others you're not, but you're all wearing the same uniform. Like how do we kind of unify and kind of work to pull the rope in the same direction as often as we can? And yeah, I mean, I think, listen, I'm really proud of the educational opportunities that we offer at Old Dominion. Like super cool. We actually just merged with Eastern Virginia Med School, which puts us like now we're Virginia Health Sciences at Old Dominion University. It's now the largest university med school in the state, in the Commonwealth, right? And then we're one of only 3. It's VCU and UVA. That puts us at like a tier 1 research university. There's only like 164 public universities that have that tier 1 research, like highest level of research designation. I think the Carnegie Institute has us ranked at that position. Like super proud of what we offer at Old Dominion, just like I was super proud of what we offered at Stony Brook and super proud of what we offered at UMass Lowell. But at the end of the day, like your value in the real world post baseball comes way more from what you're picking up in that locker room and on that field and being able to be a supportive teammate off the field than what that degree says, unless you are going into a very specific like degree profession, right? Like I can't go build bridges. Like Dylan Brown's going into, civil engineering. Like my man can help out with the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel right now, I think, and crush it. Like I ain't going to be able to take my English degree from Holy Cross and do that. However, the vast majority of our guys, like their experiences, like people are going to want to hire them because they came from like our program and this really good environment that those guys got better from as people. Hopefully, like that's our goal, right? Outside of the, again, winning games, but like you're going to get hired for those experiences way more than you're going to get hired for the degree. And I think that anybody that kind of gets hung up, especially these days in 2024, maybe it mattered generationally before, but like in 2024, like your job's to bet on yourself post baseball and recognize that the value, unless you're going to a very like the 1% universities, right? Like that the networking is so acute and so profound that like, hey, just being able to slide that degree automatically gets me a job. Like there's I don't know, there's a couple dozen of those. Outside of that, like a lot of these schools are created equal based on the fact that like, it doesn't matter unless I guess it's your willingness to bet on yourself post baseball, I think is the most important part of like setting yourself up for post baseball. Like being able to find a school, you're going to have an incredible experience, that a place you can call home in the short term and long term, place you can surround yourself with like-minded people. And then like that to me is what the search should be now. And then realizing that like long term, I'm going to be fine if I can learn skills at that place. Like that, if that place is a good fit, then I'm going to be learning skills short term and long term. And guess what? Like I'm going to be okay because I'm willing to bet that when I go into an interview, I can hold my own. They're gonna feel like my confidence, my conviction in myself, like my self-assuredness and who I am as a person, what makes me awesome, and my ability to connect with other people and work with other people. Like that to me is the value of places like this and programs like this. And I think that supersedes these days. Like, I think like people that are companies trying to hire people, like you're getting way more out of those types of people, regardless whether it's Old Dominion or somewhere else, than, hey, this guy got this degree at this place. I think that has a far greater factor than people and families ever really want to admit.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think you kind of answered the advice question in terms of how to go about this and like really what to hone in on. And I don't want to say the baseball stuff will take care of itself, because there's a lot of work and a lot of stuff that has to go into that. But if you're going through this process with the mindset that you just described, you're going to find some success. And if you have some people around you that have experience in the baseball world that can point you in the right direction of programs, levels of play, types of coaching staffs, development opportunities, you're going to have success in this process. And I mean, you hit on so many important things today, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
No, like you guys are doing really cool stuff. And I give you a ton of credit, because it ain't easy, right? Because you guys are finding your like path in baseball, but you're doing it without the adrenaline rush that comes with, like every spring. So like you're playing this really like delayed gratification, this long game that is challenging. But I think you guys are threading the needle and doing this in a really good way that allows you to stay in the game and stay connected and really be able to, again, the things that you guys got into coaching for, which is like being able to like have a message that you would want to share, and impact other people's lives in a really positive and healthy way. Like you guys are still getting the opportunity to do that. You're doing that, but you do it without the adrenaline rush. You also do it without having to write up any itineraries for, you're not having to call a bus company and get a backup bus because this one didn't show up. I still remember my last trip to Marist, like our bus driver took us like an hour and a half in the wrong direction. And we showed up literally like I never been, I think this was 2010. So maybe my first year at Marist, and maybe that was the last time we went, and our first year at Stony Brook, and bus driver got us lost. It's a complete show and go. Like we literally got off the bus and we were starting 30 minutes later, because there's no lights, right? Like it was a midweek. We gotta go. Like we don't got time. Literally, like kid gets off the bus, gets on the game. Like we get like, it was like a bloodletting. We gave up maybe like a run an inning, or maybe at least one, maybe two. We lose like 11-3. Coach, like God bless Coach Sank, and he's sitting at the end of the dugout, and we finally get Marist gets the third out, and he just looks at me and he's like, "Well, that was a waste of $3,000." like the bus, like just like done, like that was a complete waste of a trip. So like you guys, my point to all that is, you guys get to stay connected, stay involved in this game, and still hit on all the important factors of impacting other people. And those are the reasons, why most of us got in this game in the first place. Like, hey, we want to make an impact on other people, and we want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So you guys, it's awesome that you guys keep getting to do that. But you also get to keep your hair and not have to go through the stresses that we get to go through. So, I think you guys are doing all right here, but I appreciate you guys having me on. It's cool to be able to kind of talk shop here a little bit and kind of, speak on some of the things that I think I've learned right through my kind of time in this profession. It ain't always easy. It's a rewarding one. But it has its challenges, and it's cool to be able to kind of look back on it, especially some guys that like you guys have worked your tail off. Like, again, like I've been able to see you guys in your careers, and the work that you guys invested on the coaching side and the recruiting side, and like, getting out there at the beginning stages, like we all were, like that was hard. And I don't think like guys, families that you work with will ever fully appreciate the amount of sacrifices that you made to try and get your career started in this profession. Like, it's super freaking challenging. And so it's cool to be able to see you guys kind of evolve into this new space. And I think a space that is incredibly needed, necessary, it's important, and hopefully really valuable for a lot of families that are making connections with you.
Appreciate that, man. It's a pleasure having you on, man. I'm glad that this is a fun part for us, is that we get to have guys like you and Chris and Tish and Soups, and I mean the laundry list of guys that we get a chance to just get on here and chop it up. And I don't know, Keith has the same sentiment too, but like every time we get a chance to talk to old friends, old coaching buddies, it's like I learn something, get more information, different way to think about things. Go to bed at night and be like, man, that was really interesting what he had to say. I'm gonna unpack that a little bit, and this stuff's fun for us, and we appreciate you taking the time. I know you're super busy. You got 3 kids. We got a chance to meet a couple of them before we got on, which was awesome.
You had to go through the Marron introductions here before bedtime. You guys got a little snapshot in, but no, I appreciate it. And you guys, it's cool. Obviously same with you guys, like you building your families out, and yeah, we're all busy. We all got our stuff, but we're all trying to find our little snapshots in a day that we can do stuff like this. And I don't know, I think it's an awesome resource. I look forward to staying connected with you guys, and I think you're doing awesome work. And I mean that sincerely from afar, from all the way down here in old Norfolk. I appreciate and think you guys are doing awesome stuff. So keep it up, and hopefully the people that are listening that are either working with you or thinking about it, and hopefully they understand the value that you guys are kind of putting out there, and can kind of learn some things from you guys too.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you. Good luck with the fall. We will be living vicariously through you in the spring, like we do with many of our other coaching friends. ODU is on the tab of D1 baseball that we go to regularly. So keep it up, man.
I appreciate it. We're going to need some extra support this year because we're going to be road warriors. We got a $22 million facility renovation about to kick off in December. And that means that we are going to be, that was built on the shoulders of that 21 team, right? To be a national seat, or not a national, but to finish 11th in the country, and then to not be able to host, I think put a lot of, I think it was right. It was hard in the moment to have to go through that, but it was also great because it kind of challenged, everybody in the community and the university to kind of step up and say, hey, these guys need a facility that matches the level of play that those guys are at. Like if we're competing at a national level, like we need a facility that's going to balance out to that level. And so we're fortunate we're getting that, shovel in the ground this winter, but that means that we're spending 40 of our 56 games on the road, and the 15 that we get to play at home in the Sun Belt, I think are either, hopefully we get to play down the road at the Tides facility, the Orioles AAA park. It's either that or, depending on their scheduling or wherever else we play, whether it might be across the way in Hampton or a couple other spots. Like we're going to be road seasoned by the time we get through this thing. So we're going to need all the love and support from guys like you all year, because it ain't going to be easy, but that's why we do it, right? We need to do hard things. This is one of them.
Hell yeah, baby. Monarchs, let's go, baby.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.